Hi, everybody. Another great job last week. We began the section of the course where we focus on labor markets in professional sports. Last week, we predominantly focused on models of a competitive labor market and how they can provide insights into why salaries in professional sports are relatively high compared to many other professions. Good work once again with the team discussions. I think the main point we recognized was there's an important difference between being paid a lot and being overpaid. While many of you felt the contribution to society by professional athletes is far less than that of some other professions, such as doctors and teachers were mentioned, perhaps what we see here is that pay is not the same thing as contribution to society. That's important to keep in mind. And of course, how one measures contribution is critical. Many of you felt pro athletes are not overpaid. Some of you even believe that they're underpaid. And while many of us do find the salaries of some athletes to be absurdly high, it's still important to consider the position of the owner relative to the player. In other words, if ownership is capturing a larger share of revenue generated by the player, then how can the players themselves possibly be overpaid? Some highlights from the team discussions. From team one, Jill makes the important point that it depends on one's perspective and that according to traditional economic theory, that athletes aren't overpaid. They simply are earning a wage equal to their marginal revenue product of labor. Mikey, I appreciate, brought in some stats and let us know that Russell Wilson, quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, is due to make $35 million next year. In Team 2, Rachel made a good point as to how economic theory and the model of a competitive labor market can show athletes being overpaid in the presence of roster restrictions, roster limits. Nate made a really nice point about perspective and considered the pay of all of those, he gave the example of football, all of those Division I, even Division II, Division III football players who would like to go to the NFL, all of the players in the alternative leagues, such as the XFL, and he considered the number of all those players relative to the number who actually make it to the top, and the disparities in pay between those towards the bottom of the profession and those at the top, suggesting that perhaps those at the very top in the NFL aren't actually paid that much. From Team 3, Tyler and Jessica 2 make a good point and say it's hard to say if they're overpaid or not, but that at least according to economic theory and the theory of a market, that's simply supply and demand. They aren't overpaid. It's just market forces at work. Evan and the rest of Team 4 said that athletes are underpaid. Maybe they're onto something here. And Naquan mentions the owners and their position relative to the players. And what about being compensated for being inspirational or a good role model for younger individuals in society? Team 5 was another team as a whole that said, no, athletes are not overpaid, if anything, underpaid, as Kyrie said. And Stephen and James mentioned once again the forces of supply and demand and the model for a market, at least a competitive market, showing us that no, they're just simply being paid a substantial amount due to the revenue that they generate. James in particular mentions the limited supply and extensive demand leading to high salaries. Similar feelings from Team 6 in that most there believe athletes are not overpaid. Will says absolutely not. It's just supply and demand at work, and also considers the positive social image of players and asks, are they compensated for this? So once again, really nice job, as always, with the team discussions. This week we will be covering labor market imperfections and learn a model of a non-competitive labor market. I'll try to get your problem sets graded as soon as possible. Please keep up the great work. Be sure to get your posts up by their due dates. As always, let me know if you have any questions. See you guys online.